20. Worst divorces. Gospel legends tried to hide. What if the very voices that carried you through your darkest Sundays were falling apart when the church doors closed? Behind the robes, the awards, and the godly couple's smiles, some gospel legends faced betrayals, bruising divorces, and secrets so heavy they tried to bury them in silence. Tonight on Legends of Black Excellence, we're pulling back that curtain not to shame anyone, but to tell the truth about faith under pressure. Stay with me because the next name on this list might truly surprise you. And before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Your support keeps this channel alive. CeCe Winans. CeCe Winans stands as one of gospel's most cherished artists, known for a voice that feels both tender and commanding. Because she has spent her career singing about covenant mercy and enduring love, some online narratives try to place her inside hidden divorce compilations, but her real-life record doesn't match that framing. CeCe married Alvin Love II in 1984, and there is no verified report of a divorce or separation. Their relationship has lasted through decades of touring ministry and public attention, an outcome that is rarer than many people realize in any entertainment world, especially one tied so tightly to church expectations. Still, rumors have trailed her at times, not because facts support them, but because she guards her home life with ironclad privacy. CeCe doesn't turn interviews into confessionals. She doesn't answer every headline. Instead, she lets her work and her steadiness speak. For some observers, that restraint gets twisted into something to hide, yet it may actually be the opposite, a decision to protect what's sacred from becoming a spectator sport. In gospel spaces where image can feel inseparable from calling, choosing discretion can be an act of wisdom. Would you rather see your favorite gospel singer explain their marriage publicly or keep it between family and God? If CeCe belongs anywhere near this title, it's as a reminder that not every storm ends in divorce, and not every private couple is secretly broken. Sometimes, longevity is real, and silence is simply a boundary. Her story shows that faith-driven love can survive fame not by being perfect, but by staying rooted when the noise gets loud. Fred Hammond. Fred Hammond has been a cornerstone of contemporary gospel for decades, shaping the sound of worship with a musician's precision and a pastor's sensitivity. From his early rise with Commission to his solo era, he became known for songs that feel like refuge music that meets people in anxiety loss and recovery. Yet the man who helped millions hold on to hope went through a marriage collapse that he kept largely out of the spotlight. Fred married Kim Hammond in 1986, and their union lasted nearly 20 years before ending in divorce in 2004. There was no media circus, no tell-all rollout, and few public explanations. In a genre where family life is often treated as part of the calling, that quiet ending carried its own kind of weight. The aftermath showed up not in headlines, but in tone. Longtime listeners noticed a new gravity in his later work lyrics that sounded more like lived prayer than polished performance. People close to him have said the breakup hit hard, reshaping how he saw himself not only as an artist, but as a spiritual guide. He remained deeply committed to fatherhood, raising his daughter Brianne and his adopted son Darius Bubba, both of whom later joined him, musically subtle reminders that even after rupture, love in another form can keep growing. Fred's divorce stands as one of the gospel world's most painful private chapters, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. His journey suggests that a leader's faith isn't proven by avoiding heartbreak. It's proven by what he builds after it. Karen Clark Sheard. Karen Clark Sheard is gospel royalty with Detroit roots, the youngest of the legendary Clark sisters, and a vocalist whose runs helped rewrite what modern church singing could sound like. Her life has unfolded in two demanding worlds at once, the stage and the sanctuary. She married Bishop J. Drew Sheard on June 16, 1984, and they have remained married over 4 decades, building a family and a ministry side by side. So despite how certain hidden divorce lists try to frame her, there is no verified divorce in her story. What exists instead is relentless pressure, the expectation that a first lady of a major denomination must be unshakable, always composed, always above rumor. Karen has carried that weight while touring, recording solo projects, mentoring younger singers, and raising 2 children who became artists in their own right, Kiera Kiki Sheard Kelly and J. Drew Sheard II. She has also endured private trials that never belonged to gossip columns, including a life-threatening surgical complication in 2001 that left her in a coma and forced a long recovery. Moments like that can either fracture a household or fuse it tighter, and the Sheards chose the second path. When a public couple survives decades of scrutiny, do you see that as faith discipline or both? If Karen fits the spirit of this title at all, it's as a counterpoint. A woman repeatedly rumored about yet still standing in the same covenant. Her silence isn't evidence of a cover-up. It's a boundary shaped by church culture and personal dignity. In a genre where many unions did collapse behind curtains, Karen Clark Sheard represents the rare marriage that weathered the spotlight and kept worship at the center of home, not headlines. Tamela and David Mann. Tamela and David Mann are often labeled gospel's golden couple, but what makes their journey gripping isn't a flawless image, it's staying power. They met in Fort Worth through church life and community theater, married in 1988, and have spent more than 3 decades building a family while sharing a calling. Tamela's powerhouse church-bred vocals and David's grounded everyday humor turned them into beloved staples, especially through Tyler Perry's stage plays and movies. Their chemistry on screen looks easy, but real marriage behind a public brand is never effortless. That visibility is exactly why speculation keeps chasing them. Every few years, social media insists they've quietly split. Yet there has never been a confirmed divorce, and the Manns consistently reject the rumors. They've been honest about pressure points, constant travel, working together day after day, and the heavy expectation to be a model Christian marriage for everyone watching. Instead of pretending those strains don't exist, they describe them as seasons that forced growth, learning to listen better, argue cleaner, forgive faster, and protect the home from becoming a business extension. Their reality show, It's a Man's World, also revealed something many couples recognize: laughter can be a survival tool, not a mask. With 4 children, shared ventures, and a long public partnership, the Manns remind us that not every gospel love story ends in a hidden breakup. Sometimes the louder truth is quieter. The covenant holds year after year, even while the internet waits for a collapse that never comes. Leandria Johnson. Leandria Johnson has never fit the church-perfect mold, and that's exactly why her divorce story hits so hard. She rose to national attention after winning BET's Sunday Best in 2010, but her breakthrough didn't arrive with a fairy tale backdrop. Leandria has openly said she was once homeless and already a twice-divorced mother by the time she auditioned singing on television, while her personal life was still in pieces. Unlike many gospel stars who protect their image at any cost, she has lived her marital failures in plain view, and the honesty has been both her burden and her bridge to fans. Reliable reporting shows she has been divorced at least 3 times. An early marriage that began around 2001 ended quietly. She later married Forrest Walker, a relationship that unraveled amid repeated turbulence and emotional distance. Her most recent marriage to Michael Underwood became a long, painful legal battle, ending when a judge granted the divorce in August 2020. She confirmed that split herself later that year, not with a press tour, but with a simple, wounded kind of relief. Those ruptures were layered with widely known struggles with alcoholism, which intensified public judgment and made rebuilding trust at home even harder. Have you ever watched someone fall again and again, yet still hoped they'd make it? Leandria's voice sounds like her life, raw, trembling, unfiltered. Her divorces didn't cancel her calling, they stripped away pretense. What's left is a singer whose testimony isn't about looking spotless in church, but about getting up when love collapses and still choosing to sing anyway. Hezekiah Walker. Hezekiah Walker has spent his life leading worship with the kind of conviction that fills sanctuaries and stadiums alike. Born in Brooklyn and raised in church, he became a defining voice of urban gospel and later a bishop whose influence reached far beyond music. Yet even with that public authority, his home life became the subject of whispered headlines. He married Monique Walker in 1992, and together they welcomed a daughter, Kyasia Monet Walker. For many years, the family image seemed steady until reports began circulating that the marriage had ended sometime in the mid-2010s. Neither Hezekiah nor Monique has ever offered a detailed sit-down explanation, and that silence has allowed speculation to grow louder than facts. What is clearly documented is the climate around his personal life. In the mid-2000s, sensational stories spread about his private identity and an explosive divorce. Hezekiah publicly denied those claims, calling them false, and continued pastoring and recording without addressing the gossip further. Whether the later split happened quietly or was still unfolding behind the scenes, the pattern is consistent. He refused to let controversy become his pulpit. He stayed in ministry focused on his daughter and kept his personal wounds away from the stage. In the context of Worst Divorces, Tried to Hide, Hezekiah Walker's story reflects how gospel culture can turn marital trouble into a public trial. Even without a dramatic press trail, the weight of expectation and the cost of being human in front of believers can be crushing. BeBe and CeCe Winans. BeBe and CeCe Winans rose from Detroit's legendary Winans household to become one of gospel's most recognizable sibling duos, blending church-rooted conviction with mainstream polish. Their harmonies made family look like destiny, which is why any fracture in their personal lives felt shocking to longtime listeners. The two eventually stepped away from recording together in the mid-1990s to pursue solo callings, and in that same era, BeBe's marriage quietly unraveled in a way many fans barely noticed. He wed Deborah Denise Winans in 1987. After roughly 16 years, their relationship ended in divorce in 2003. The split was not promoted, not performed, and not explained in the way celebrity culture expects. Years later, however, Deborah described the marriage as painful and alleged domestic mistreatment, a disclosure that reframed what had once been treated as a private separation into a deeply troubling story for a faith community. CeCe's path could not be more different. She married Alvin Love II in 1984 and has remained with him for more than 4 decades, raising 2 children and later celebrating a 40-year milestone publicly. Her steadiness has often made her a target for gossip precisely because she doesn't dramatize her home life. Do you think silence protects holiness, or sometimes protects hurt? Together, BeBe and CeCe represent a striking contrast inside one famous family. One sibling navigating a confirmed, painful divorce with lingering controversy, the other holding a long marriage under relentless scrutiny. Their story fits the title not because they courted scandal, but because gospel fame can magnify every crack, whether you try to hide it or not. Shirley Caesar. Shirley Caesar has carried the title First Lady of Gospel for a reason. Her voice, her stage command, and her pastoral authority have steadied generations. Yet her personal life was never packaged for publicity. She married Bishop Harold Ivory Williams in 1983, and their union lasted 31 years until his death on July 4, 2014. That matters here because some online narratives twist her story into a secret divorce, but the documented truth is different. There was no breakup, only decades of partnership followed by widowhood. They co-led Mount Calvary Word of Faith Church in Raleigh, North Carolina, navigating the constant pull between national ministry and home responsibilities. Still, the strain was real. Shirley often lived on planes and platforms, preaching and singing across the country, while remaining a wife in a tradition that expects a pastor's household to look unshakable. Friends have long described her as fiercely disciplined, someone who kept private burdens, private not to deceive, but to protect the sacred space of family. That discretion sometimes invited gossip, especially in seasons when Bishop Williams' health declined, and she carried more of the public load alone. Yet she never let curiosity rewrite her narrative. Her grief, like her joy, stayed dignified, and her music after 2014 carried a deeper tenderness, the kind only long companionship and loss can teach. In the frame of Worst Divorces, Tried to Hide Shirley's chapter is a caution against careless labeling. Her story isn't about a hidden split, it's about endurance service and the quiet cost of holding a calling and a household at the same time. Kim Burrell. Kim Burrell has always been a force in gospel, an unschooled genius at the piano, a singer whose tone can cut through a room like a testimony. But her most turbulent chapters didn't happen under stage lights. They unfolded at home, mostly out of view. Kim married musician and pastor Joseph "Jojo" Wiley in the 1990s, and they share a son, Christian. The marriage later ended, but unlike many celebrity splits, there were no glossy statements, no sit-downs, and no public timeline she invited people to study. In fact, much of what the public knows comes from scattered confirmations that they are no longer together, while the why has remained hers alone. That decision to keep her divorce quiet wasn't accidental. Kim has spent her life in a part of church culture where a woman's calling can be questioned if her marriage fails. Add fame on top of that Grammy-nominated albums industry respect from artists far outside gospel, and a reputation for fearless vocals, and the scrutiny multiplies. So she did what many gospel women do: protect the personal, keep ministry moving, and let the music carry whatever words she didn't want to say out loud. Have you ever felt judged for a private struggle you never asked to share? Kim's story fits the title, not because of tabloid drama, but because of how little she allowed the world to see while healing. Her performances after the split often sound more weathered, more urgent, as if survival reshaped the instrument. In her case, the hidden divorce didn't silence the gift, it tempered it, turning pain into a deeper kind of authority. James Fortune. James Fortune's rise in gospel felt like a victory lap for survivors. As the frontman of Fiwaya, he delivered radio staples such as "You Survived, I Believe and Trust in God" songs that sounded like a hand on your back when life got heavy. But the hardest chapter of his life wasn't written in a studio, it happened at home, and it detonated his marriage in front of the whole church world. In October 2014, Fortune was arrested in Texas after a violent incident involving his wife, Cheryl. Police reports described severe injuries. The case quickly became one of the most disturbing domestic violence scandals in modern gospel. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to assault on a family member, received 5 days in jail and 5 years probation, and was ordered to have no contact with his estranged spouse. The marriage later ended, and Cheryl became his ex-wife. What made this story especially painful for fans was the contrast. Here was a man who wrote anthems about endurance, yet was exposed as someone who had harmed the person closest to him. Fortune didn't disappear. Over time, he admitted he had been abusive, spoke about anger control and shame, and entered counseling. His music afterward leaned less toward celebration and more toward confession songs shaped by consequences rather than charisma. In the frame of Worst Divorces, gospel legends tried to hide this isn't a tale of quiet separation. It's a public collapse that forced accountability in a genre that often prefers to whisper. Fortune's legacy now sits in tension, undeniable musical impact, and a marriage ruined by violence, proof that talent and calling don't cancel the need for character. Tina Campbell, Mary Mary. Tina Campbell, one half of the Grammy-winning duo, Mary Mary, became a symbol of modern gospel joy until her real marriage story forced the genre to stare at something it often avoids. She married drummer-producer Teddy Campbell in 2000, blending a young family with a fast-growing career. By the early 2010s, their union faced a devastating turn. Teddy admitted to multiple affairs, including a long relationship that had lasted years. The revelation didn't land in a private counseling office. It played out in public through interviews and the WeTV reality series Mary Mary, where fans watched Tina process shock, anger, humiliation, and the slow grind of rebuilding trust. What made this chapter so gripping wasn't a courtroom filing, but the fact that Tina stood at the edge of one. She spoke honestly about how betrayal shattered her sense of safety, how faith didn't erase rage, and how forgiveness was not a moment, but a brutal, repeated decision. Instead of walking away, she chose restoration therapy, accountability, and a relearning of intimacy that had to be earned back day by day. Her solo work especially. Its personal carries that furnace heat. Not polished church talk, but the sound of a woman fighting for her home without pretending it was easy. If your spouse broke your heart, would you rebuild? Or would you leave Tina and Teddy remain married? And their story has become a lifeline for couples who love God, yet still bleed. In the context of worst divorces, Gospel Legends tried to hide Tina's experience is the near divorce that couldn't be hidden at all. A reminder that even in sacred spaces, love sometimes survives only after it nearly dies. Erica Campbell. Mary Mary. Erica Campbell has lived most of her adult life in a double calling, chart-topping gospel artist and wife to one of the genre's most influential producers. As the other half of Mary Mary, she helped bring gospel into mainstream living rooms. Yet her marriage has been tested in ways many church fans recognize but rarely discuss out loud. Erica married Warren Campbell on May 26, 2001. Together, they've raised 3 children. Krista Nicole, born 2004. Warren Campbell III, born 2010, and Zaya Monique, born 2012. Publicly, they've remained a united couple, even as rumors of separation flared from time to time. There is no verified divorce on record. What is confirmed is that their relationship went through a serious fracture when Warren confessed to infidelity. Erica has spoken about how close she came to walking away, describing a season marked by hurt distrust and the slow, uncomfortable work of rebuilding. Instead of turning that crisis into a media spectacle, she framed it as a spiritual and emotional battleground fought at home through counseling, prayer, accountability, and honest conversation. Her later solo music carried more grit and lived-in wisdom, not because she was selling drama, but because she was singing from a place that had been scorched and then restored. In the context of worst divorces, Gospel Legends tried to hide Erica's chapter matters precisely because it didn't end in divorce. It shows how gospel marriages can be wounded in private, reshaped in truth, and strengthened without needing a courtroom finale. Israel Houghton. Israel Houghton helped reshape modern worship, mixing choir intensity with pop and R&B polish that reached churches worldwide. For years, his public life looked as grounded as his music. He married singer Melissa Houghton in 1994, and they ministered together while raising 3 children. Privately, though, the marriage was fraying long before fans knew. In February 2016, Israel announced their divorce after more than 2 decades, admitting that his unfaithfulness had broken trust, and that the couple had been separated for a period before the split became public. The confession stunned listeners who had attached his songs to their own ideas of covenant and stability. Gospel audiences reacted with shock because Israel wasn't only an artist, he was a worship pastor and conference leader. At the time, he served at Lakewood Church, which placed him on leave as the news spread. Supporters felt betrayed. Critics felt confirmed, and many asked whether a leader who fell at home could still lead in church. Israel chose a direct path, public apology counseling, and a commitment to accountability. When he returned to music, the tone felt humbler, as if the platform had been re-earned rather than assumed. Audience question: when a worship leader falls, do you want honesty or silence? Later in 2016, he began dating Adrienne Bailon. The timing intensified scrutiny, yet the relationship lasted. They married in 2019 and welcomed a son, Ever, in 2022, marking a new family chapter after a public collapse. Israel's place in this list comes from that collision between ministry and mortality. A man whose songs taught surrender while his marriage ended under the weight of secrecy, fame, and personal failure. Juanita Bynum. Juanita Bynum's marriage and breakup became one of the clearest examples of how a ministry fairy tale can unravel behind velvet ropes. By the early 2000s, she was already a household name in Pentecostal and charismatic circles, preaching to packed arenas, selling best-selling books, and headlining women's conferences. In July 2002, she married Bishop Thomas W. Weeks III, and their April 2003 black tie ceremony was televised nationwide, complete with an enormous bridal party, a live orchestra, and a level of grandeur that told supporters this was a divine love story for the ages. Many people saw them as spiritual royalty building an unstoppable empire together. But the dream curdled fast. Within a few years, reports described rising tension time apart and repeated attempts to repair what was breaking. Then came the moment that forced everything into the open. In August 2007, after meeting to talk through their separation, an argument outside an Atlanta hotel turned violent. Weeks was arrested and later charged after Bynum reported being choked, kicked, and beaten. She filed for divorce the next month, citing cruel treatment, and the case became a public battleground, part courtroom drama, part church debate about power, silence, and survival. The divorce was finalized in June 2008, just weeks before their 6th anniversary. Bynum moved forward with a striking clarity, saying she felt relief and peace rather than shame. The fallout reshaped her ministry voice, less focused on romantic fantasy, more on healing boundaries and reclaiming dignity. Her story still matters because it exposed a hard truth. Spiritual titles don't guarantee safety at home, and sometimes the strongest testimony is choosing life over image. Dietrich Haddon. Dietrich Haddon's life has never followed a quiet script. Raised in Detroit's church world and propelled into gospel stardom with a sound that blended worship and urban edge, he became known as much for bold creativity as for a personality that didn't fit neatly into anyone's box. That same intensity carried into his first marriage, which later collapsed under heavy public scrutiny. Dietrich married his first wife, Demita Haddon, in the 1990s, and together they built both a family and a ministry image that many fans admired. Over time, however, the relationship deteriorated and ended in divorce, amid widely reported accusations of infidelity that shook his standing in the gospel community. What made this breakup especially severe wasn't just the split. It was the speed and harshness of the judgment that followed. In gospel culture, divorce can be treated as disqualification, and Dietrich faced real backlash, canceled invitations, whispers about his calling, and a sense that his failures were being weighed louder than his gifts. Instead of disappearing, he confronted the fallout head-on. He acknowledged wrongdoing, spoke about spiritual accountability, and pressed forward with music that sounded less like performance and more like a man wrestling with consequence. That honesty didn't erase the pain of the divorce, but it changed the narrative from scandal to growth. If someone you respect falls publicly, do you believe they can still be restored? Later, Dietrich rebuilt his personal life and eventually remarried, forming a new family while continuing to lead worship and release music. His story fits this title because the divorce wasn't staged for headlines. It was a private collapse that became public in a genre where image matters deeply. In the end, Dietrich Haddon represents a hard gospel truth calling, doesn't prevent failure, but it can shape what you become afterward. Yolanda Adams. Yolanda Adams has always looked like grace in motion. To many fans, she isn't just a singer. She's a steadying presence, the calm voice that shows up when life is loud. But behind that serenity were two marriages that ended quietly without headlines or public blame. Her first marriage began in 1987 when she wed Troy Mason. It lasted only a few years, ending in 1990. Much later, Yolanda shared that she had experienced domestic abuse in that relationship. She didn't reveal it to shock anyone. She spoke about it the way survivors often do, carefully, after the scars have hardened enough to tell the truth. In gospel spaces where women are sometimes expected to endure in silence, Her decision to leave and later speak was its own kind of ministry. She tried again in 1997, marrying former NFL player Tim Crawford. From the outside, it seemed like a fresh start. Shared faith, shared future, a family growing in the public eye. Their daughter Taylor Ayanna was born in 2001. Yet even this second union couldn't withstand the strain, and the couple divorced in August 2004. Yolanda didn't turn heartbreak into a media tour. She stepped back into her calling music radio mentoring, letting her songs carry what her interviews never would. Yolanda's story fits this title not because she hid wrongdoing, but because she guarded her dignity. She shows that divorce can be a painful chapter without becoming a public performance, and that sometimes the strongest testimony is choosing peace when love can't be saved. Donnie McClurkin. Donnie McClurkin's name often drifts into hidden divorce talk. For one simple reason, his life has been surrounded by silence, speculation, and deep emotional history. But here's the verified core: Donnie has never been married. So there is no divorce to uncover, no secret court record, no ex-spouse waiting in the wings. What does exist is something more complicated. A gifted man whose private battles became public debates even when he never invited them. He rose from Long Island with a voice that could turn grief into worship, breaking through in the 1990s with songs like "Stand and We Fall Down." Yet his personal story was never a clean celebrity arc. Donnie has spoken about childhood trauma, family violence, and the loss of close loved ones, pain that shaped both his faith and his guardedness. Over the years, rumors about his romantic life and sexuality swelled, especially after he publicly discussed past same-sex experiences and his decision to live in alignment with his beliefs. In gospel culture, that alone can spark relentless gossip. And for Donnie, it meant every friendship or private choice was treated like evidence in a trial he didn't ask for. Should a private life become public property just because someone sings for God? So if Donnie fits the emotional spirit of this title, it isn't through divorce, it's through the cost of being misunderstood. His story shows that sometimes the worst thing the public tries to expose isn't a breakup at all, but a human being's struggle to survive scrutiny while staying faithful to a calling. Marvin Sapp. Marvin Sapp's story is often pulled into lists like this, but the truth is different and just as heartbreaking. He didn't live through a hidden divorce. He lived through a loss that felt like one. Marvin married Melinda Prince in 1992, and together they formed a partnership rooted in church music and family. They raised 3 children, Marvin Jr., Micah, and Madison, while serving in ministry and building a life that many gospel fans admired from afar. For years, Melinda wasn't just his wife. She was his manager, his anchor, and his closest confidant. Then in 2010, after a long battle with colon cancer, she passed away at only 43. The moment shattered him, and the grief became public because his voice was public. After her death, Marvin's music carried a different kind of weight. Songs like "Never Would Have Made It" already sounded like survival, but now fans heard them through a new lens, not as performance, but as lived mourning. He stepped into single fatherhood overnight, balancing stadium-sized responsibilities with quiet nights of parenting through sorrow. The years that followed were filled with whispers about dating or moving on, yet he has never remarried, and he rarely entertains speculation. His devotion to Melinda's memory has remained steady, almost protective, as if love didn't end, it simply changed shape. Marvin's chapter belongs near this title only as a reminder that not every painful gospel break comes from divorce. Sometimes the worst separation is the one death forces, and the only way forward is to keep singing through the empty space. Tasha Cobbs. Leonard. Tasha Cobbs. Leonard arrived on the gospel scene like a jolt of electricity, huge unfiltered vocals worship that feels arena-wide, and a testimony that never pretends life is neat. Because her rise was so fast, some commentators try to place her inside hidden breakups narratives. But the verified timeline says otherwise. She and music producer Kenneth Leonard married on March 3, 2017, and they remained together serving as co-pastors and building a blended family. She stepped into motherhood not through headlines, but through real life, becoming a stepmom to his 3 children, and later welcoming an adopted son into their home. What's truly gripping in Tasha's journey isn't a secret split. It's the weight of carrying calling, leadership, and healing at the same time. She has spoken plainly about being diagnosed with depression in 2007, years before the big awards and chart dominance. That honesty mattered to fans who thought faith meant never struggling. Instead, she offered a different picture. You can love God deeply and still need help, rest, and treatment. Her performances after those revelations didn't shrink. They grew more urgent, as if worship had been tested in fire and came out tougher. Have you ever kept showing up for others while your own heart was exhausted? Since founding the Purpose Place Church with Kenneth, she has lived in the tension of being both global worship leader and local shepherd, 2 roles that demand time, patience, and emotional stamina. Love under that load doesn't stay flawless. It stays practiced. Tasha's story shows that a couple can withstand intense public pressure without becoming a cautionary headline, and that the real chain-breaking often happens off-stage in counseling rooms, prayer circles, and the daily decision to keep choosing each other. Kirk Franklin. Kirk Franklin is one of the architects of modern gospel's crossover era, an artist who took choir-rooted faith and wrapped it in hip-hop, R&B, and stadium energy. Yet for all his public triumphs, his marriage has never been a glossy fairy tale. Kirk met Tammy Collins in the mid-1990s. After an early breakup, they reunited and married on January 20th, 1996. Their home became a blended one. From day one, Kirk had a son, Carry-On, from a previous relationship. Tammy had a daughter, Carrington, whom Kirk later adopted. Together, they welcomed 2 more children, Kennedy in 1997 and Keziah in 2000, forming a family that grew under constant spotlight. What makes their story fit the spirit of this title is not a divorce, but how close they've said they came to one. Kirk has admitted a long struggle with pornography addiction that began in his youth and later bled into his marriage. Both he and Tammy have described seasons where friendship was thin, trust was tender, and the spark felt buried under fame, trauma, and exhaustion. Instead of pretending holiness meant no cracks, they chose counseling by their own account, about 4 years of marriage therapy, sometimes with Kirk flying home between tour dates to keep appointments. That kind of work is unglamorous, and that's exactly why it matters. Today, they remain together, still candid that love didn't survive because it was easy, but because they fought for it with honesty, help, and faith. Kirk and Tammy's journey reminds audiences that the real miracle isn't never breaking, it's repairing what nearly did. So what do these stories tell us at Legends of Black Excellence? Some gospel giants endured confirmed divorces that shook their ministries. Others were pulled into rumor mills despite decades-long marriages, and a few survived near collapse through counseling, accountability, and grace. The common thread isn't that faith failed, it's that fame didn't shield anyone from being human. But here's the question that splits audiences. Should gospel leaders be held to a higher marital standard than the rest of us? Or does that expectation push pain underground and reward performance over healing? Drop your take, because how we answer may shape gospel's future.